The captured veteran. The dim light of the cell cast an eerie glow across Thaddeus Riker's weathered face. The retired general sat motionless on the hard metal bench, his eyes closed in quiet contemplation. Around him, the alien ship hummed with activity, the sounds of his captors going about their business. Riker had seen many battlefields in his long career, but none quite like this. The Zorgans, a ruthless species bent on galactic domination, had ambushed his transport ship and taken him prisoner. Their reptilian features and cold, calculating eyes spoke volumes about their intentions. But Riker wasn't afraid. He had stared down death countless times and emerged victorious. This was just another challenge, another opportunity to prove the resilience of the human spirit. As he sat in the dimness, Riker's mind drifted to the intelligence briefings he had received about the Zorgans. They were a technologically advanced race, their ships and weapons far superior to anything Earth had encountered. They conquered worlds with brutal efficiency, enslaving populations and stripping planets of resources. Yet for all their advancements, the Zorgans had a critical weakness: arrogance. They believed themselves undefeatable, their empire destined to rule the stars. It was a flaw Riker intended to exploit. The sound of approaching footsteps drew Riker from his thoughts. He opened his eyes, squinting against the sudden brightness as the cell door slid open. 2 Zorgan guards entered, their armor glinting under the harsh lights. They flanked a taller figure, a Zorgan with elaborate markings on his uniform. "General Thaddeus Riker," the Zorgan said, his voice a guttural hiss. "I am Commander Zelok. You have the privilege of being my guest." Riker met Zelok's gaze, his expression impassive. "Guest? Is that what you call your prisoners?" Zelok's lipless mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "You will find that cooperation is greatly rewarded on this ship. Defiance, on the other hand." He let the threat hang in the air. Riker didn't flinch. He had heard countless such threats in his career, from enemies far more intimidating than this self-important alien. "I'm not here to be rewarded or punished," Riker said, his voice calm and even. "I'm here because your empire made the mistake of thinking Earth would be an easy target." Zelok's eyes narrowed. "Earth will fall, like so many worlds before it. Your capture is proof of our superiority." "My capture proves nothing," Riker countered. "Except perhaps that you're even more foolish than I thought." The commander's hand twitched towards the weapon at his side, but he stopped himself. "You will learn respect, human. One way or another." With that, Zelok spun on his heel and marched out of the cell. The guards followed, the door slamming shut behind them with a resounding clang. In the renewed darkness, Riker allowed himself a small smile. The first seeds had been planted. Zelok's pride would be his downfall, and Riker would be the one to orchestrate it. But he couldn't do it alone. He needed allies, even in this den of enemies. His gaze fell on the younger of the 2 guards, the one who had hesitated before following Zelok out. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of doubt perhaps. Yes, Riker thought, he would be the key. The general settled back against the wall, his mind already weaving the threads of a plan. The Zorgans thought they had captured a helpless old man. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. For Thaddeus Riker was more than just a prisoner. He was a soldier, a strategist, and above all, a survivor. And he would show these aliens the true strength of human resolve. A glimmer of defiance. Days turned into weeks as Thaddeus Riker remained in Zorgan custody. The routine was always the same, long hours of isolation punctuated by interrogation sessions with Commander Zelok. The Zorgan leader was relentless, employing every tactic from threats to bribes to break the human's will. But Riker remained steadfast, his resolve unshakable. In the rare moments when he was left alone, Riker studied his surroundings, memorizing every detail of the ship's layout. He noted the guard schedules, the subtle shifts in their demeanor. And he watched Ensign Zyler, the young Zorgan who seemed different from the others. Zyler was assigned to escort Riker to and from his cell. Unlike the other guards, who handled the prisoner with rough indifference, Xyler was cautious, almost hesitant. Riker sensed a conflict within him, a questioning of the Zorgan way. One day, as Xyler led him back to his cell after another grueling interrogation, Riker decided to test his theory. "Why do you serve them, Xyler?" he asked, his voice low and measured. The young Zorgan stiffened, his eyes darting around to ensure they were alone. "I serve the Zorgan Empire. It is my duty." Riker nodded, his gaze piercing. "But do you believe in what they're doing? The conquest, the subjugation of other species?" Xyler's steps faltered. It is not my place to question." "Isn't it?" Riker pressed. "You have a mind of your own, Xyler. A conscience. Don't let them take that from you." The ensign said nothing, but Riker could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. A seed of doubt had been planted, and Riker knew it would grow. In the following days, Riker continued to engage Xyler in conversation whenever possible. He spoke of Earth, of the beauty and diversity of its people. He described the horrors of war, the toll it took on both victor and vanquished. And he hinted at the Zorgans' vulnerabilities, the chinks in their seemingly impenetrable armor. Xyloc, meanwhile, grew increasingly frustrated by Riker's resistance. The interrogations became longer, harsher. But Riker endured, drawing strength from the knowledge that he was getting under the commander's skin. One evening, as Xyloc paced the interrogation room, Riker saw his chance. The commander was ranting about the inevitability of Earth's defeat, his arrogance blinding him to the subtle prompts Riker was offering. "You underestimate us," Riker said calmly. "Just as you underestimated the Valtari." Xyloc froze, his eyes narrowing. "What do you know of the Valtari?" Riker shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Only that they too were once a thorn in your side. Until you found a way to neutralize their defenses." The commander leaned in close, his breath hot on Riker's face. "The Valtari were weak. Their shields were no match for our ion cannons." Riker suppressed a smile. Ion cannons. A valuable piece of intelligence, gleaned from a moment of unchecked pride. As Xyloc resumed his tirade, Riker filed the information away. It was a small victory, but a significant one. Every detail, every scrap of knowledge brought him one step closer to his goal. And then, the breakthrough he had been waiting for. Xyler appeared at his cell in the dead of night, his face a mask of determination and fear. "I can't do this anymore," the young Zorgan whispered. "The things we've done. The worlds we've destroyed." Riker sat up, his heart pounding. "You can help end it, Xyler. You can help me stop them." In the darkness, a pact was made. Two unlikely allies, united by a shared desire for justice. It was a dangerous game they were playing, but Riker knew the stakes couldn't be higher. For in the vastness of space, a new hope was kindled. And the Zorgan Empire, in all its might and cruelty, had no idea what was coming. The interrogation begins. The interrogation room was cold and sterile, the metal walls seeming to close in from all sides. Thaddeus Riker sat motionless in the center of the room, his wrists and ankles bound by energy shackles. Despite the discomfort, his expression remained impassive, his eyes fixed on the door. It wasn't long before Commander Xyloc strode in, flanked by two armed guards. The Zorgan leader carried himself with an air of smug satisfaction, as if he had already won some great victory. "General Riker," Xyloc began, his voice dripping with mock cordiality. "I trust you're finding your accommodations suitable." Riker met his gaze evenly. "I've had worse. Though I must say, your hospitality leaves something to be desired." Xyloc's eyes narrowed. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries, shall we? You have information we require. Information about Earth's defenses, its weaknesses." The general leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing at his lips. "And what makes you think I'd betray my own people?" "Because you have no choice," Xyloc snarled. You will tell us what we want to know, or you will suffer the consequences. Riker's smile didn't waver. I've endured torture before, Commander. There's nothing you can do to me that hasn't already been done. Zelok's face contorted with rage. He lashed out, his fist connecting with Riker's jaw. The general's head snapped back, but he made no sound. You underestimate the depth of our methods, Zelok hissed. We have ways of extracting information that your primitive mind can't even comprehend. Riker spat blood onto the floor, his gaze never leaving Zelok's. And you underestimate the strength of human resolve. We don't break easily. The interrogation stretched on for hours, Zelok alternating between threats and violence. But Riker remained resolute, meeting each question with stony silence or cryptic non-answers. You're wasting your time, he said at one point, his voice hoarse from thirst. I won't betray my oath, no matter what you do to me. Zelok's frustration was reaching a boiling point. He paced the room like a caged animal, his talons clicking against the metal floor. You will talk, he growled. Or I will personally oversee the destruction of every last human settlement. Starting with your precious Earth. Riker's heart clenched at the thought, but he kept his expression neutral. You're welcome to try. But you'll find that humans are a lot harder to eradicate than you think. It was then that Zelok made his mistake. In his anger, he let slip a crucial detail. You think your pitiful resistance can stop us? We have hundreds of ships, thousands of warriors. We will crush your defenses like we crushed the Valtari and the Kreshel before you. Riker filed the information away, his mind racing. The Valtari and the Kreshel. 2 more pieces of the puzzle, 2 more clues to unraveling the Zorgon's plans. As the interrogation dragged on, Riker's strength began to wane. His vision blurred, his limbs heavy with exhaustion. But still, he held on, clinging to the knowledge that every moment he resisted was another moment Earth had to prepare. Finally, Zelok seemed to reach his limit. With a roar of frustration, he stormed out of the room, leaving Riker slumped in his chair. As the guards dragged him back to his cell, Riker allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He had won this round, but the battle was far from over. For in the depths of the Zorgon ship, a new alliance was forming. And with it, a glimmer of hope in the darkness of space. An unlikely alliance. In the quiet of his cell, Thaddeus Riker sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes closed in meditation. The pain of his injuries had faded to a dull ache, eclipsed by the sharp focus of his mind. He was deep in thought, piecing together the fragments of information he had gleaned, when a soft knock at the door roused him. Riker opened his eyes to see Ensign Xyler slipping into the cell, his movements furtive and uncertain. The young Zorgon glanced over his shoulder, as if afraid of being seen, before turning to face the general. I don't have much time, Xyler whispered, his voice tight with tension. The guards will be back soon. Riker stood slowly, his gaze searching. Why are you here, Xyler? The ensign hesitated, his eyes darting around the room. I can't be a part of this anymore. The things we've done. The worlds we've conquered. It's not right. A flicker of hope kindled in Riker's chest. He had seen the doubt in Xyler's eyes, the unease in his demeanor. But to hear him say the words aloud. You're a brave man, Xyler, Riker said softly. It takes courage to stand up to your own people. Xyler shook his head, his expression anguished. I'm a traitor. If they find out. They won't, Riker assured him. Not if we're careful. And not if we work together. The ensign's eyes widened. Work together? How? Riker stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. You have access to the ship's systems, don't you? Security protocols, communication arrays. Xyler nodded hesitantly. Then you can help me get a message to Earth. Warn them about the Zorgon's plans. The Zorgon's face paled. That's treason. If I'm caught. I know the risks, Riker said. But think about what's at stake. The fate of countless worlds, the lives of billions. Including your own people. Xyler was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with resolve. What do you need me to do? Over the next few days, Riker and Xyler met in secret, plotting and planning. The ensign provided valuable intelligence about the Zorgans' movements, their military hierarchy. Riker, in turn, shared his knowledge of Earth's defenses, the strengths and weaknesses of human strategy. Together, they began to form a plan. A way to strike at the heart of the Zorgan Empire, to cripple their war machine from within. But it would require precision, timing, and no small amount of luck. We'll only have one chance at this, Riker warned. If we fail. Xyler set his jaw, his eyes hard with determination. We won't fail. We can't. As the days ticked by, the tension on the ship grew palpable. Zelok's frustration at Riker's continued defiance was reaching a fever pitch, his interrogations growing more brutal and unhinged. But Riker endured, drawing strength from his newfound ally and the knowledge that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. And then, the moment they had been waiting for. Xyler burst into Riker's cell, his face flushed with adrenaline. It's time, he said breathlessly. The guards are changing shifts. If we're going to make our move, it has to be now. Riker stood, his heart pounding. This was it. The culmination of weeks of planning, of risking everything on a desperate gamble. But as he followed Xyler out of the cell and into the bowels of the ship, he felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. The calm of a soldier who knows his duty, who is willing to lay down his life for the cause. For in the cold vastness of space, a spark had been lit. And the fire of human defiance, once kindled, would not be easily extinguished. The escape unfolds. The corridors of the Zorgan ship were eerily quiet as Thaddeus Riker and Ensign Xyler made their way through the dimly lit passages. Their footsteps echoed on the metal grating, each sound a reminder of the dangers that lurked around every corner. Xyler led the way, his movements quick and furtive. He had disabled the security cameras along their route, but they both knew it was only a matter of time before their absence was noticed. The hangar bay is just ahead, Xyler whispered, his voice taut with tension. If we can make it to a shuttle. Riker nodded, his jaw set with determination. He had memorized the layout of the ship, the location of every airlock and escape pod. But getting there would be the real challenge. As they rounded a corner, the sound of marching feet brought them up short. A patrol of Zorgan soldiers was headed their way, their weapons at the ready. Xyler's eyes widened with panic. We have to hide. If they find us. But Riker was already moving, his body coiled with the instincts of a seasoned warrior. He pulled Xyler into a side corridor, pressing them both against the wall as the patrol passed by. For a long moment, they held their breath, listening to the fading footsteps of the soldiers. When silence returned, Riker turned to Xyler, his gaze intense. We keep moving, he said quietly. No matter what happens, we don't stop until we're off this ship. Xyler swallowed hard, but nodded. Together, they pressed on, navigating the labyrinthine corridors with a mixture of stealth and speed. At last, they reached the hangar bay. The cavernous space was filled with shuttles and fighter craft, their hulls gleaming under the harsh lights. But between them and freedom stood a dozen Zorgan guards, their weapons trained on the entrance. Riker's mind raced, calculating the odds. They were outnumbered and outgunned. A frontal assault would be suicide. But then, an idea sparked. A risky gambit, but one that might just work. Xyler, he whispered. I need you to trust me. When I give the signal, I want you to run for that shuttle over there. Don't look back, no matter what you hear. The ensign's eyes widened. What about you? Riker's smile was grim. I'll be right behind you. Now get ready. With a deep breath, the general stepped out into the open, his hands raised in surrender. The guards spun to face him, their weapons leveling at his chest. "Don't shoot!" Riker called out, his voice ringing with authority. "I surrender myself into your custody." For a moment, the guards hesitated, confused by this sudden turn of events. And in that moment, Riker acted. With a speed that belied his age, he dropped to the ground, rolling behind a stack of cargo crates. At the same time, he shouted, "Now, Xyler. Go!" The ensign burst from cover, sprinting for the shuttle. The guards, caught off guard, spun to face this new threat. And Riker opened fire. He had snatched a blaster from one of the guards, and now he laid down a blistering barrage of cover fire. The Zorgans scattered, returning fire wildly. Xyler reached the shuttle, scrambling up the ramp. The engines roared to life, the craft lifting off the deck. And Riker, still firing, made a desperate run for it. Blaster bolts sizzled past him, scorching the air. But he didn't falter, his eyes locked on the open hatch of the shuttle. With a final burst of speed, he leaped, his hands catching the edge of the ramp. Xyler hauled him inside, the hatch slamming shut behind them. And as the shuttle blasted out of the hangar bay and into the star-strewn void, Riker allowed himself a moment of triumph. They had done it. Against all odds, they had escaped the clutches of the Zorgan Empire. But even as relief washed over him, Riker knew this was only the beginning. The real fight, the battle for the fate of the galaxy, was just getting started. A new front opens. The stolen Zorgan shuttle hurtled through the void, its engines straining as it pushed deeper into uncharted space. In the cockpit, Thaddeus Riker and Ensign Xyler worked feverishly at the controls, their faces lit by the glow of the instrument panels. "We can't stay in Zorgan territory," Riker said, his eyes scanning the star maps. "They'll have patrols searching for us." Xyler nodded, his fingers dancing over the navigation console. "I'm setting a course for the Maelstrom Nebula. The ion storms there should mask our energy signature." As the shuttle banked towards its new heading, Riker sat back in his seat, his mind racing. Their escape had been a victory, but a small one in the grand scheme of things. The Zorgans were still out there, their conquest of the galaxy unchecked. But now, they had a chance to change that. "Xyler," Riker said, his voice low and urgent. "I need you to tell me everything you know about the Zorgans. Their fleet movements, their command structure, any weaknesses you might have seen." The ensign hesitated, the weight of his betrayal hanging heavy on his shoulders. But then he squared his jaw, a look of determination crossing his face. "I'll tell you what I can," he said. "But you have to understand, I was just a low-level officer. There's a lot I wasn't privy to." Riker nodded, his expression understanding. "Every bit of information helps. We'll piece it together, find a way to strike back." Over the next few hours, as the shuttle hurtled through the stars, Xyler shared all he knew. He spoke of the Zorgans' military hierarchy, the way their ships were organized into strike groups and battle fleets. He described their weapons, their shielding technology, the weaknesses in their communication networks. And Riker listened, his mind whirring with possibilities. A plan was taking shape, a daring gambit that could turn the tide of the war. But first, they needed allies. "We can't do this alone," Riker said, as the Maelstrom Nebula loomed before them, a swirling mass of gas and dust. "We need to contact Earth, let them know what we've learned." Xyler frowned, concern etching his features. "But how? The Zorgans will be monitoring all frequencies. They'll intercept any transmission we send." Riker's smile was grim. "Not if we use their own technology against them." With Xyler's help, Riker began to modify the shuttle's communication array. They worked through the night, rewiring circuits and reprogramming protocols. It was delicate work, each connection a potential point of failure. But as the hours ticked by, a sense of hope began to build. They were doing something, striking a blow against the very empire that had sought to crush them. And then, as the nebulous storms raged outside the viewport, they were ready. Riker took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the transmission button. This was it. The moment of truth. "People of Earth," he began, his voice steady and clear. "This is General Thaddeus Riker. I have escaped from Zorgan captivity and now bring urgent news." He spoke of the Zorgans' plans, their military might. But he also spoke of their weaknesses, the chinks in their armor that could be exploited. "We have a chance to fight back," he said, his words ringing with conviction. "But we must act now. The Zorgans are not invincible. With courage and determination, we can beat them. We must beat them." As the message beamed out into the depths of space, Riker felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They had taken the first step, lit the spark of resistance. Now, it was up to the rest of humanity to fan those flames. To rise up and fight for their freedom, for their very survival. The war had entered a new phase. And on the front lines, leading the charge, would be Thaddeus Riker and his unlikely ally, Ensign Zyler. Two soldiers from opposite sides of the conflict, united by a common cause. For in the face of tyranny and oppression, sometimes the most powerful alliances were forged in the most unexpected places. And as the shuttle disappeared into the swirling embrace of the nebula, Riker knew that their fight was just beginning. But it was a fight they would face together, no matter the odds. For the freedom of the galaxy itself hung in the balance. And they would not rest until that freedom was won. The end.